Good morning, everyone. Welcome on this balmy Sunday morning. I have to say, when I was standing in the back of the church before Mass, and then when I was sitting up here, I was just so touched again by all the wonderful people we have in this parish. It's just an amazing place. I know so many of you, and I know all the wonderful things you do, how devoted you are to your families, how devoted you are to one another, and to the world at large. It's just really inspiring for me, and really put a smile on my face this morning and warmed my heart, even though the church wasn't quite heated up yet. But as Father Tom says, don't worry, when you leave, it'll be fine for the next group. So I have a confession to make. I grew up in Scituate, and the priests and nuns down there would probably tell you, if they were still around, that I wasn't much of a Catholic growing up. I was probably more interested in getting in trouble and trying to get out of things and really, putting my heart into the practice of my faith. But the one thing I always took away from those times, even though I wasn't paying attention as I might have been, was that, that God loved me and God loved each one of us. And that we were called to take care of one another and to love one another. And the other thing I really remember from those times, and a lot of you probably remember those times very well, that post-Vatican II period with the guitars and everything else, were those great folk songs we used to listen to right back then, Day by Day, and we got the whole world in our hands. And the one I really liked the most, and the one that I thought of as I was preparing this homily, was, "They will know we are Christians by our love." I always liked that one. It's touched me for some reason. And I thought of it as I was preparing, because really that hymn is about witness, right? It's about sharing the love that God has shared with us with everyone we meet. And it's a way, through our actions, through our deeds, through our love for one another, of revealing Christ to the world in a way that people can readily understand. And that's, in large part, the point of this gospel, this beautiful story of the wedding in Cana. It's the third of what you call the Epiphany Gospels that we've heard the last 3 weeks, right? On Epiphany Sunday, we heard about the adoration of the Magi. And then last week we heard about the baptism of the Lord, which actually in the Eastern Orthodox Church is their Epiphany Sunday. And then finally this week we hear about the wedding at Cana, where Jesus reveals himself to his disciples through his miracles. And it reminded me of what we're called to do. Jesus has revealed himself in his time and his place, but he calls us to do the same. To be a witness to him in the world, so that people would not necessarily know that we are Christians by our love, because that's not the point. The point is that they know Jesus by our love. So how do we do that? Well, I think this gospel gives us a few clues. First of all, I think it all starts with empathy, with listening to one another and seeking out each other's needs and being attentive. And we see the person who demonstrates that so beautifully and so perfectly, which is our Lady, our Mother Mary. Because while everybody else at the party seems to be focused on having a good time, what she's focused on the newlyweds. Like any good mother, she's always making sure everything is just right. She's always looking outside of herself. And when she sees there's a problem, they're running out of wine, she just doesn't just sit on her hands and do nothing about it. What does she do? She knows there's a problem, but she also knows there's a solution, right? And the solution is her son. And so she goes to him and intercedes with him on behalf of the couple. She says, they have no more wine. In other words, do something about this, right? A classic motherly prayer. And even though Jesus sort of responds in the beginning, almost like he's rebuffing her, like, what does this have to do with me? My hour has not yet come. she's not discouraged at all, is she? She knows he's going to do what she's asked him to do. So she doesn't even respond to him. She turns to the servants and she says, do whatever he tells you to do, because he's going to fix this problem. And so she's a wonderful model for us of both empathy and intercession. That rather than just being turned inward on herself, as a model of Christian love, she's always looking out around her to others to try to find a way to be of help and of use to those in need, whether it's spiritual or material, whether it's a stranger or a member of her family. And we're called to do the same. We're called to always be looking for those in need and then offering up prayers and petitions to our Father in heaven for those that need our help, but most importantly, need his help. But that brings us to the second model in the story, because when we talk about people needing our help and then needing his help, sure, but how does God typically help people? Through us. And that brings us to the servants. Those servants are amazing. They're some of these classic figures in the Bible. I find some of the people in the Bible who don't get named and don't really have big roles, sometimes the most compelling role models for us. And these servants for sure fit into that category, because look at them. They're sitting there, they're waiting to be told what to do. And that's what we're called as well, as followers of Jesus. Now that doesn't sound very, elevated in the world. And the world says, why are you waiting for someone to tell you what to do? You should be telling somebody else what to do. But not in the kingdom. Jesus says, if you would be my disciple, you must be a servant of all. You must love all. And so the servants are what we're called to be. But they're not just half-baked servants, are they? Because when Mary says to them, do whatever he tells you to do, they don't just do what he tells them to do, they go the extra mile. Jesus says, fill the water pots up, and what do? They fill them to the brim. They fill them to overflowing. And then they take it to the head waiter, who gives it to the people. And what do they receive? Not water, not ordinary cheap wine. They receive the sweetest wine they're ever going to receive. The one that will satisfy not only their body, but their very souls. The sweet wine of Jesus. So that's our model. We're called to be people who are attentive to the needs of others. We're called to be people of prayer. And we're called to be servants who use our gifts in the service of others. But there's one catch to all this. Sometimes it's hard to know what our gifts are or what we're called to do. Right? Every one of us has a different set of gifts, and sometimes maybe we're too hard on ourselves. We're self-critical, and we say, oh, we can't do that. We're not ready for that. I'm going to fail at that. I'm not a good public speaker. Remember when Moses was saying that? I can't do this, I can't do that. But these are gifts that are given to us by the Spirit, we hear in that second reading from Corinthians, right? That God gives us these different gifts, and he gives them to us out of his wisdom and out of his will, so that we could do what? We could be blessed for sure, and then we could take those gifts and bless others. And so we can be confident when we go out into the world that we're not just sort of operating as independent contractors. We're operating under instructions from the King. And he's not going to just leave us bereft to hope for the best. He's going to empower us to do his will. If we just follow that great advice from our mother to do whatever he tells us to do. And if we do that, bless people. And as I said at the beginning, they're not just going to know we're Christians and say, oh, those people are awesome. Look at those holy people. Because that's absolutely not the point.